there are on the Air Care Alliance website under the pilot section. But you also email me and I'll give you the additional information.
Yes.
Hey, good evening, everyone. Thanks for attending. It's great to be doing these again. I'm glad you could make some time for us now that the weather is getting good and the flying conditions are a little bit better. I imagine people will be off doing that. Have some interesting new scenarios to go over this time. One just happened, which will be interesting. So I'll just go ahead and dive in. I'm Mark Hanson, FAA safety rep. I've been doing a lot of volunteering for about 15 years. Rob, who is now infamous in the maintenance world. And we really enjoy doing these, and I'm happy that you guys are making it. So let's dive in. The record button's been hit. And of course, here we go. So you know who we are. We have our FAA hosts that are making this happen from the regional FAA teams, thanks to Jim and Eric. Occasionally, we'll have Brian Schiff from Texas attend, and he'll provide commentary in the Q&A. AOPA is going to be giving us some content going forward. Mary Kuhn, who's based in Maryland and is a pilot and was also an airline pilot at one point, will be joining us. She may join us in July to start, but she may be a regular panelist going on after that. And Stacy Alstad is a pilot in California, an Air Care Alliance board member, and is interested in joining the safety initiative that we have. So it will be good to have two new faces and you're having to look at Rob and I all the time. So
there you go.
So, and everybody should already know this, that everyone can make a meaningful impact, doesn't matter what you fly. And also just to know that non-pilots can be, impactful as well. And just to let you know, I mean, it can be any plane. I've flown many, many different kinds of airplanes on volunteer missions, as you can sort of see from this list. And I've also paid for airline tickets and rental cars. And most anybody, whether you're flying once every 5 years or on a regular basis, can make a really big impact for a family or an individual or an animal. We know about the WINGS program. We'll have this slide in every time we give the presentation. We just want to emphasize that it's a good way to make sure that you're working on proficiency and safety. And success today, we make sure we're synced up on the reward and the need and how rewarding it is, share some experiences, and gladly take your questions. Whoops. And every month, I'll introduce a new number that will help you understand how big the need is, because it's huge compared to the number of flights that we're actually doing right now. So in prior months, we've gone over that there's 6 million cancer treatment appointments missed every year due to transportation. And a large number of that is due to long distance transportation. 32 million people live rurally. And as you can see over here on the right-hand side, many hospitals and treatment centers are closing on a regular basis annually. And Texas is actually closing more than anyone else. But no one in the country is immune from the shrinking number of treatment centers that you can go to for any type of medical care. In the US, there's 53 million family caregivers, which is an impressive number. And half of them say they have no support, and a quarter of them say they need support, they just can't find. So of those 53 million, there's 1 billion rides given per year, and that's in the bottom left. So you can see that there's a big need for transportation, and those families typically have no idea that long distance transportation is available for no charge from a variety of these organizations. So again, big need. We're just scratching the tip of the iceberg with the work that we're doing. So volunteer pilot organizations, I'm not sure if I ever commented on what this picture is, but you end up flying year-round in the Northeast US, and that means you get used to flying on runways and taxiways that are totally covered with snow. Makes for an interesting experience because they typically don't go over much training with you when you're getting your license on how to deal with that. So the types of organizations, every month we go over this as well, medical care, disaster relief, but there's many other things like animal rescue, conservation, cargo like blood transfer or bone marrow, or medical supplies to rural communities in the central US. There's also just education discovery fun stuff, introducing people to aviation. There's a couple of groups now, but one very good one, Freedom Network, and doing addressing human trafficking, compassion flights, and those are things that are more for joy than a medical necessity. Taking a grandparent to see an ill child, transporting a veteran to and their family to PTSD programs, variety of things. And there's a number of organizations around the US. And if you ever have questions about them, you can look on the Air Care Alliance website or just feel free to email me. I've flown for 11 of these different organizations, and I've gone through the pilot onboarding process for about another 6 or 7 and just haven't gotten around to flying for them yet. So I have a pretty healthy perspective on what each of these organizations can do if you do have questions. All right, let's go here. Who we serve, I think everyone's getting used to seeing this picture. There's a wide variety of folks that we serve in animals and cargo. So if you have an interest in a specific area, there's going to be an organization that you can be impactful by joining and supporting either in the air or on the ground. And every month now we're featuring 2 different volunteer pilot organizations or charitable organizations. This one, this month is Angel Flight South Central. You can see here in the bottom right that they cover the lower central US and mostly Texas. And this woman here, if you remember, there was a Southwest flight where there was an engine that blew up. And they had decompression and they had to do an emergency landing. This is the Southwest pilot of that particular flight.
I'm Tammy Jo Schultz. I've had the privilege of serving my country as a Navy pilot, flying A-7s and F-18s, and then flying commercially for Southwest Airlines, Boeing 737s. Recently, I was inducted into the International Air and Space Hall of Fame. But more to the point today, I serve as an Angel Flight pilot. My husband and I both fly missions for Angel Flight South Central, as well as serve on the river. I'm here to encourage you to use your special skills as a pilot to give life-saving, life-changing medical attention to those less fortunate by giving them flight to and from those appointments.
So good group. They not only do missions, this is how many missions they did last year. They're now also doing court-appointed support agent transports, and this is helping children get advocates into the rural parts of Texas in particular that would otherwise have very long distance drives and sometimes be away for 2 or 3 days. And when they do these trips, that advocate can be away just for the day. So very important to be rounding out the services that they provide. And this is a unique one as well.
Flight partners with Center Wings are varied. We have a lot of flights with the Waterkeeper Alliance. We fly the Southern Highlands Conservation. We fly wildlife, reporters, anyone who wants to take a look at environmental issues in the Southeast.
They also do endangered animal transport and other types of services in the Southeast US and occasionally something beyond that area. Lighthawk, I've got one of their hats on, also does it nationally. Very good organizations. And again, if you guys have any specific information about these, feel free to email me or go to the Air Care Alliance website.
Flight partners.
So safety considerations, I think we've all seen the list every month. This month we'll focus on the usual red ones, which are the most onerous: distraction and startle, and mission completion bias and human factors. This one will have this month we'll also have a couple on weather, more than a couple on weather that I think you should find interesting. I do, and it's a lot of fun. And here's something I ran across and I thought everyone should be aware of. There's an FAA circular that is available for you to review that's really pushing self-briefings before we go off on a flight. The data in this is actually pretty good and was updated and fairly recently, again in 2023. So this is how you can get access to it, and highly recommend that you consider reading that content. What I'm also doing is on the Air Care Alliance website under the safety area, you'll find not today, but at sometime towards the end of the month, a list of all the websites that we refer to in all these different webinars. So you'll have, if you don't click it correctly or take a picture of any of these QR codes, they'll be available on the website. So here's another fun one. There was recently a controllers meeting in the Boston area. And they said, hey, do you know that there's no NextRad coverage in Vermont under 6,000 feet? And we said, what? What do you mean there's no NextRad coverage? So I thought it kind of interesting to find a map of where NextRad is covering and what the ceilings are for the coverage areas. So 4,000 feet above, up to 4,000 feet above the ground is light yellow, which is the majority of the US. But then it goes, you'll see there's very definitive areas where it's 6,000 above and areas where it's 10,000 above or not covered at all. So you'll see that southern parts of Canada between upstate New York and Michigan quickly go into 10,000 feet above and white. And if you're traveling from Boston to Minnesota, by the way, you'll enter a coverage area that will not be particularly good. So if you're curious about that, you can search for NextRad coverage as a topic on the web and find out more. But I thought you might be as impressed as I was that it's just not 100%, even in major areas. Air Care Alliance website, just to give you a quick hint as to where to go look for safety resources, and where I'll be posting lists of all the websites that we refer to. So let's go. This is in here every month, and I go through it very quickly. This is, again, a high-level review of how the entire end-to-end process works. And again, the most critical thing is getting people to know they can ask for a flight, whether it's a conservation flight, a medical flight, an educational STEM flight, but they know that these services are available. So you're our Army. The volunteer pilot organizations do a good job of vetting the need and making sure we're finding people that are interested and actually have a legitimate need. And then we as pilots have to treat them, as our guests and do whatever we can before the event as well as during the event to make it as safe as possible. The AOPA course, just a reminder, as always, that this course is available. There's a lot of good resources available to you there, and it will help you develop your own checklist that you can use for doing any kind of public benefit flying. The types of checklists that you need may vary by the type of flight that you're doing, and it's important for you to develop these and think through how you want your checklist to look. And we'll dive right into our first scenario. And this is an interesting one and sort of a repeat message. And Rob, real quick, no Q&A items to start.
We've got one question. Can you show on the screen or next time where they're going to see you at Oshkosh? The Boeing Plaza.
Oh, so we're going to be in Boeing Plaza.
Yeah.
So if you come there, but we'll also have a list of the forum events, and we'll have that list published beforehand. So you can either send me an email, it'll be in the pilot section on the Air Care Alliance website, and it will be in printed material in our static display in Boeing Plaza. So we're going to be in the southwest corner of Boeing Plaza.
Thanks, Mark.
So that should be pretty easy to find. And again, if you sign up as a pilot, you get a free A&W root beer float coupon from me personally. So something different this year for fun. Anyways, so not sure if anyone has noticed this in ForeFlight or any other app where you see a line of weather and thunderstorms, but the lightning strikes are appearing ahead of where the clouds and rain are indicated on ForeFlight. And not something that I think is a common thing to consider. When in this particular case, usual thing, last minute flight, 2 adults and a teen. Teen was urgently needing to get to a diagnostic visit in Boston. They were late. We knew thunderstorms were building in the afternoon. And the routing they wanted to give me was through the thunderstorms, so I selected an alternate airport. The white course on the left is what they wanted me to fly, which is a rather standard course. And it was taking me very close to the depicted line. And the clearance that I was talking to said, it looks like you should, they used my favorite word, should be fine. And when I looked at it, I saw the lightning strikes. I said, no, no, no. This circle is 25 miles across. So the lightning was going to be 5-ish miles, from my route of flight. And we already knew that this is an old depiction once it makes it to ForeFlight. So I said, so I took off because they weren't agreeing to me getting a different route. And New York airspace is some of the busiest airspace in the US, and it's very hard to negotiate anything. So I went ahead and accepted it, but as soon as I got airborne, I started saying, guys, this is not looking good. This is, negotiating a way to get around it. And eventually they gave me direct to a waypoint on the RNAV 35 into this particular airport. And one of the things that I was curious about, because I had not seen it before, was these lightning indications ahead of the cloud front. But as I was flying, you could see the lightning, and it looked like it was coming out sideways from this front that was pretty tall. And I was in an SR-72 or SR-22, so I was looking up and to the side at this wall of storms coming at me on this flight. So it was kind of one of those interesting moments. So one thing I probably could have done is, before I even flew down there and I knew the storms were going to be there, worked out multiple plan Bs instead of working out plan B on the ground once the people started being there very late. This has happened so many times now. I should know better, especially with first-time people trying to find their way to an airport and getting lost, that I need to think not about being 30 minutes late, but being 1 or 2 hours late, what it's going to do to my planning. And I'm not sure how many of us think that far out as a contingency, but in this particular case, it was like I right away said, I should know better. It just happens, especially with first-time people. But then, I did, what I did well is not letting myself get distracted and asserting myself to make sure I was going to be safe, because you're a PAC, you're the one that's going to get, the responsibility for all of this. So the next rad, what I found out, does not depict the anvil. And in the research, the lightning can be 90 to 100 miles away ahead of the front, which is an insane number that I really didn't know existed. So this is what I found on the web, is that the anvil lightning is a real thing and can be that far out. And the controllers are not seeing that. They're just seeing the rain. So we could be seeing things on ForeFlight that depict what's going on in the anvil, or even beyond the anvil. In this case, it would be sideways. You could have sideways lightning and be in jeopardy, especially in a small plane. So whenever you're seeing this, you want to make sure that you treat it really seriously, because there is something unique going on that the controllers can't help you avoid. So that's why I thought this was an important one to remind people of. It was very impressive watching this from the plane, and even where I was on the magenta line on that routing, it felt like it was way too close. I'm not sure if there's any questions on that one, but
Yeah, there was related. Just a question on what the weight limit for a passenger. Had this gentleman or anonymous person had a 350-pound passenger, and what are the considerations? And
that's a very extremely good question, because it happens more than you want it to happen, because the office staff are going through a list of questions, and depending on the organization, it's either 250 or 300 pounds. And depending on your airplane, a lot of people don't look into this, your airplane seat has a weight limit. And it would be good for you to know what that is, so you don't accidentally take a 300-pound person in a plane that can't handle a 300-pound person. Then some of the organizations, and I think we went over this in one of the months prior, some of the organizations will get height and weight, and with that you can estimate girth and decide whether the person's going to fit easily into the seat belt.
Mhm.
So those are things that you want to make sure you're asking, especially if you just see a big weight number and the organization has not given you a height. And if the organization doesn't do it, you can certainly work it into your discussion, uh, when you do your pre-flight call into the passengers. But definitely don't be shy. You never want to. I showed up. Yeah, I have a lot of stories on this. I showed up in Philadelphia thinking that I was on a last minute flight because a pilot had a mechanical, thinking I was picking up a woman who I'd flown many times, her daughter, and her son. Uh, I got there, her son was 300 pounds, and they had a dog that was not on the itinerary. So, luckily in this case, I had not yet fueled the airplane, so I was able to leave a lot of fuel out of the airplane, and it was only in a relatively short flight, uh, and everyone could fit. But I was not happy, and I thought the office could have done a better job of vetting this, and it did result in some changes in the office, and this was many years ago. So all of the organizations try their best. They get new staff. They may not be emphasizing questions enough. And you as PAC are the last line of defense. You should be trying to get this information out of doing a pre-flight call or email or some kind of contact. But then when you get to the airport, if it's not going to work, you shouldn't be shy. It's it's obviously very important not to get caught in mission completion bias.
Great, Mark. Thank you. Hey, do you mind if I put a little plug in for the New England Aviation Safety Zoom next
Oh,
Tuesday?
fire away. Fire away.
Third Tuesday of the month. Veronica Coate, who is a aviation weather professor at Bridgewater University out in the Cape, is going to be presenting at 7 o'clock that evening. She just does a great job with weather, expanding and giving a bunch of information that's very useful and applicable. Some good tools. Anyway, thanks, Mark.
No, no, good. And this is an appropriate slide to bring it up on. It's anything on weather. We can't be doing enough planning because at the time I thought I was pretty well versed in weather until I saw this. So uh, keep the questions coming. It's a great topic. This is another weather one, which is equally funny, and this one's not funny, equally serious. In this case, I had the eclipse, not the cirrus, and had a very special adult uh, veteran aviator who was the former commander of the USS America. So he's always very intimidating to have in the plane at the same time because has many, many stories of flying basically every possible kind of airplane and having to punch out of a couple along the way. So returning him home to Norfolk, Virginia, I had to fly around a series of thunderstorms and a squall line. Found our way and got in, dropped him off, and I had a co-pilot with me who was just in the process of getting his type rating. So he was new to all of this and new to trying to circumvent squall lines of this nature. So made it in, but had a 100-mile deviation to get in. But found a crack, got around the back and got it and landed. And there was another squall line following it and was looking at how to get out ahead of that. But in the meantime, the storms were so bad that had shut down arrivals at Baltimore, Reagan, Dulles, and had constrained arrivals into the Northeast. So we had planes landing in Norfolk that had been diverted from Baltimore and Dulles and Reagan. So it was turning into a parking lot, and everyone wanted to get out so at the same time. So I was waiting an hour and a half and I was getting tired of waiting. And eventually they gave me a diversion that was way more than 200 miles out of the way. Instead of flying to Boston, I was flying to almost Buffalo, New York, in the Northwest, and then making a U-turn and heading back. And that was basically putting me in the northern arrivals route and not from the south, which was saturated. And I would have had to do a fuel stop to make that even work. So it was just an insane routing. But I wanted to get off, and I figured I would just beg as much as I could to get back to a better routing once I got going. And so they said I could leave, and I'm going to go to the next page in a second. But I went out to the plane, and we're walking out to the plane, and so black wall of lightning and loud thunderstorms. And they we go to take off when we were taking off to the north, and they right turn directly into the storms. And I could, I'm looking at the lightning out of the window, and it's starting to rain, and I'm still low, so I wouldn't be able to pick my way easily through it. And I said, "Why are you turning me into this stuff? I mean, it's I don't want to go there." And he said, "Oh, they're," and I think air traffic control was being very sincere. He said, "Oh, I think I see a gap. I'll just push you through that, and then you'll be on the other side of the squall line." And I said, "No, I don't think." And again, they're not seeing the lightning, so they're doing their best to try to manage the backups. But USPAC, if you can look out the window and see stuff that you shouldn't be or don't want to be flying into, you just need to be very clear about that. Uh, so I could have, if I thought they were going to do this to me, I could have asked for more clarification in the beginning, and it said no before I took off, or I could just have given up and stayed overnight one more day, and or not one more, but one day, and then left the next day without any of this to deal with. Um, and so I was definitely having mission bias sort of creep in, and the having the veteran who was looking at all this saying, "Oh yeah, you won't have a problem getting home." Sort of the peer pressure of this rather senior aviator thinking that I could do anything. Yeah, you just need to be really humble and avoid the word should or appears to be or words like that before you throw yourself into bad weather. Um, and I was definitely startled when instead of turning me north like I thought I was going to be, and they were turning me into the bad weather. It took me a second to say, "What? Why would you do this?"
Mhm.
So again, ATC is doing the best they can, but they don't have all the same data that you do, and they don't even have eyeballs looking at the airplane, and that's one of your bigger advantages.
Mark,
So here, oh, go ahead.
do you have onboard radar in the Eclipse?
We do, we do.
Does it work well?
It, I usually my statement is if I'm using radar to navigate, I failed because I'm
Okay,
way too close to the weather.
right.
If I'm above the weather and trying to navigate around stuff, or I'm near the top of weather, I might use it. But when thunderstorms are 45, 50,000 feet, and there's lightning and there's lightning, you can't if you can look out the window and find your gaps, that's one thing. So
Yeah,
when you're in a jet looking down on the weather or at least in between it, you can work your way around. But if you're in embedded thunderstorms
yeah.
and can't see your way through, having the radar, if you look on this one, the radar would just show a wall of the first layer of thunderstorms, and it would not show you what's behind it. You get
Wouldn't penetrate.
shadowing.
Yeah,
So again, I'm not that good. And if there's only one of me flying,
yeah.
and I'm trying to aviate and do analytics on the radar that's showing in front of me, and it's so close that I'm already in the rain, beginning of the heavy rain. There's not enough time to be adding these things all together. So this little picture, the black and white picture, is more or less what I was looking at. I was seeing a lot of lightning and just a wall of clouds. So big lesson learned. Don't do it. Don't be shy about doing it. And in the end, they did point me in the direction that I was hoping to get pointed into originally when I was leaving, assuming they were going to not aim me at the storms.
Hmm.
Uh, and it all worked out. But again, important lesson. You're PAC, you look out the window, you see weather that doesn't look good. You're seeing things that air traffic control just won't be able to see. You need to tell them and not feel obligated to do that routing. So it was a good lesson for the person that I was mentoring, who was getting in the middle of getting his type rating as well, because he said, "Oh, I would have just flown through that. I assumed air traffic control was,
Hmm.
telling me a good path forward." So, anyways, these again, I think are very important to share. I'm here. I'm here because I've probably said no a lot to routes that people tried to put me on. And so no more questions on this one, or?
No question, but we do have a general question, and it's related to your Air Caroline's website. And the
Sure.
question is from Ralph. Is there a way to get a copy of the slides used in this presentation?
Right now we're posting the webinars. We're not sharing the slides per se, but if you have an organization that could use them, we'll just email me and we can see what we can do.
Thanks.
We're thinking of creating an index of each scenario and publishing that on the Air Caroline's website. So that would give you easier access. And it will be by topic, so you'll be able to look them up.
And they can screenshot whatever's there too.
Yep.
Pause
And
the
then- yeah.
presentation, screenshot. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, we want to make it easy. And right now, this format probably is not as easy as it could be. So I think I shared part of this scenario last month, but I couldn't remember. And I haven't reviewed the video. But Rob, I'm not sure if you remember this at all. But this one's turned sideways, so sorry about that, guys. But if you look up an airport information on ForeFlight, it will tell you different things. And when there's a NOTAM about an important NOTAM about the airport, it will be listed in red above it on your iPhone or on your iPad. In this case, it said all runways closed by NOTAM for certain operations. That was rather onerous sounding. So we were going down to pick up someone and bring them back for treatment. So read down and saw the NOTAM and how it read. It said the airport runway was closed until 4:30, and we were supposed to be doing a pickup at 1:30. So that was not good. And it had not appeared the day before when we had looked at this particular airport. So this was one of those ones where we were already at the airport getting ready to launch. We're checking NOTAMs one more time, and we should have done that earlier in the day. And then there was a weather NOTAM that I can go over. I'm going to go over in more detail in a second. So did well is we did negotiate a favorable route to get down there, but we could have done a better job of researching the NOTAMs. So here you'll see that the NOTAM the main runway was closed, but that had this little notation here, which wasn't in red. And I called the FBO and they said, oh yeah, we're open. We don't know what you're talking about. And it turns out that the northwest last 500 feet of the runway was closed. The rest of the runway was open. But nowhere in any of my training had anyone told me how to interpret that kind of note on a NOTAM, and there was no text. The other thing was that the regular delivery service was out of service on the runway. And what we didn't know, because it wasn't in the page of NOTAMs that we were looking at, was that the automated weather wasn't working. So, and it wasn't broadcasting anything for ADS-B. It was on the next page. So that created a challenge. So here's certain operations, just highlighting those two sections. But what we did find out on the way in is that we weren't getting the weather, and McGuire gave us their weather way down here. And we were approaching to land. So we came around and headed into the wind, and we got near the airport, maybe 100 feet, could finally see the windsock, and it was a tailwind instead of a headwind. And it was a downsloping runway. So not happy. It's still 7,000 foot runway, so not particularly onerous, but not something that you want to be thinking about just as you're about to land. And talking about pilots being lemmings at time, there was somebody right behind us saying, oh, I'm just going to follow you in. So they were making exactly the same assumption that, oh, the weather at McGuire way down here must be good, even though at this airport is close enough to the ocean to be having ocean effect weather. And that's what we were getting. We were getting an onshore breeze from the ocean. So little things like that, we need to be more diligent about checking. And it was just, again, another lesson learned about what you can get caught on by not paying attention to the details and thinking through not just accepting what air traffic control is giving you as, well, this is the best information we can give you. So it's one of those ones where I won't make that mistake ever again. It's pretty clear that we need to be on top of where we're getting our weather from when there is a weather closure. And this is another fun weather one as well. And you'll like this one. This had some interesting context. So we had the context that this young girl had had a car accident, head trauma, had a real hard time driving in cars, severe headaches, couldn't sit in the same position for long periods of time, and really needed a flight to get to her diagnostic process in a major city. And it was a relatively short flight, but it was low IFR everywhere. But it was forecast to be clear. It wasn't really clearing as fast as we want. We got a new ATIS that said that it had risen just above minimums and delayed our departure, and talked to a briefer that said, oh yeah, I think it's clearing. You're right. It just went above minimums in a special ATIS. We think it's okay for you to take off. And the passenger had stayed at home because I'd warned them that we may have a delay. So 15 minutes en route, listened to ATIS again, and it's a special ATIS saying it'd gone below minimums again. So I asked air traffic control what was going on. I said, we were just told that it was clearing and that it was okay to depart and head towards this airport. And they said, well, one just diverted back to Boston, two are already in hold, and one's diverted to a nearby airport. And these were all turbine aircraft. So I said, okay, guess we have a decision to make. So instead of making a really quick decision, what to do, well, slow down everything. Don't make any rush decisions. So make sure that you're not forcing it in, not forcing an approach, not. And in this particular area, this airport's right beside I think it's 4,000 foot mountain, but it's very impressive when you do fly in. You don't want to mess up. The terrain is kind of interesting. So the patient could probably drive to this other airport because there was another airport that we were familiar with that wasn't that far away. So we finally decided, or I finally just decided, I don't want to be having this thought process in the air and I don't want to go into a hold. So why don't I just get on the ground? So diverted to this other airport that was severe clear. And over the lake, you could see this fog bank that was just thick and didn't look like it was moving. So instead of guessing anymore, did a definitive thing, asked the passengers to drive over, which I didn't know required a lake ferry, which they only disclosed to me after the fact. So I felt really kind of bad because this girl was in bad shape. So they finally get to the airport, and it of course goes above minimums just after they get there. So it's one of those things where in weather you can never really be sure, but it's better still to take a really, really conservative approach. At least that was my lesson learned from this one. I didn't want to be sitting in a holding pattern trying to figure out whether this was ever going to clear. And I also was trying to assess whether to believe flight service in terms of them giving me assessments that I would use as absolute reasons for departing, or whether I wanted to do something perhaps more precise by just dialing up the airport itself and getting better data. But it all worked out. Got them off the ground, got them down, and happy passenger. So I don't know if you have any questions on this one, but
just a general question or a general comment from Scott. A reason Next-Rad and Lightning spherics can present different TS locations is a difference in delay timing.
It is
from those products.
So, right. So the product that produces the view of the cloud layers that we are seeing is a different product than the one that shows where the Lightning is. And the Lightning one is much more recent than the cloud one. So the cloud one can be 15, 20 minutes or more off and still have gaps like we saw in that other map, whereas the Lightning one has a tendency to be more accurate. So yeah, thank you. It's a good reminder. And different products that you get in ForeFlight and other applications have that same problem. So on this one, again, air traffic control or not, flight service can be well-meaning, but shouldn't necessarily be gospel in terms of giving you ideas on when to launch. So this is a new one. This is one that happened 2 weeks ago, uh, and it was a rather sobering event. So again, adult passenger first mission, no questions. So seemed pretty calm about it. First time in a small plane, and co-pilot. In this case, I was the co-pilot, and there was another volunteer pilot. So both very experienced. I rented a brand new Cirrus, relatively brand new Cirrus, and on the way back from getting the passenger, we did the usual switch the tanks, and there was a maybe 10-inch across puff of white smoke and acrid odor that came up between the crew seats, moving from the rear of the plane forward. And not, and it cleared pretty quickly. But since both of us saw it, we just said, we're going to get on the ground like really fast. So I think we were at 7,000 feet and we were on the ground in probably 3 to 4 minutes because there would happen to be an airport very nearby. And we just told air traffic that we were just going to go there and get on the ground. So we got on the ground, and the passengers' ears hurt because we were coming down at 1,500 feet a minute, no pressurization, and remained in the plane briefly because there was no smoke, there was no other smoke, no other odor, no other indication of anything going wrong, no crew advisory messages. All of our engine temps were correct. Nothing was indicating that we had an issue. That was, but what do we need to do? We got on the ground, but we forgot to close the flight plan because and air traffic control wasn't pestering us. We told them we were just going to be focused on landing. And it didn't occur to us that we probably should have expedited getting out of the plane, but because we didn't see any symptoms, we sort of lingered for a couple of minutes and then finally got out of the plane. So I think that was a very good lesson learned that we shouldn't be just assuming that things are okay. And understand we really need to think through what was reportable and not reportable as an incident. In this case, air traffic control reported it as an incident, and we didn't. And air traffic control also called the FBO to make sure that we'd gotten on the ground and everything was okay. And they didn't bother calling us back. There was no big deal. They understood we wanted to get on the ground. So we did well getting on the ground very, very fast and not caring about whether it was a big airport, little airport. It turned out it was very little airport with no services. But it was close and it was well paved and well kept, and they were very nice to us. We did do well contacting we got the patient a ride. We immediately called the volunteer organization that was managing the flight and said, hey, we're not going to get the passenger to their appointment. Luckily, their appointment was the next day, so there was no urgent need to get someone there in a minute or two. So someone got there in an hour and a half, which was very good. Another pilot picked her up and took her on. And we decided to try to diagnose the issue. We talked to two different service centers, and the owner of the plane, because it was a rented airplane. No one had ever seen this before. They gave us, they asked us to run a test on the ground, which was starting the airplane, switching tanks back and forth, with and without boost pump. And then they asked that we fly the plane and do the same thing. We did that. We had saw no issues whatsoever. And we made a decision to go ahead and fly the plane back to home base and had no issue whatsoever. The next day, the plane went in for service. They could not find anything anywhere. So we felt like we did a reasonable amount of follow-up before we took the plane on a flight back, but we also flew very low all the way back just to make it easy for us to get on the ground if there was going to be an issue. So good example of treating something that's occurring that you've never seen before as a serious, putting the right amount of serious assessment on it and not, pushing through saying, oh, smoke disappeared, must be okay. One thing that had not occurred to me at the beginning, but we noted afterwards because I chair fly. I'm not sure how many of you guys chair fly your flights, but I'm disciplined at chair flying flights. I think it's a great way to, work on your mastery, and there's no one looking over your shoulder but yourself, so you don't have to worry about someone, getting upset with you until you've thought it all the way through. In this case, chair flying, it occurred to me that I'd seen the passenger vaping outside the FBO after we landed for this incident. And we tried to think of a convenient way of asking whether she had actually opened up something in the back seat while we were flying and we hadn't noticed, and that was the source. But she claimed that she didn't do any of that. But we just couldn't figure out something. So again, trying to connect the dots, making sure you made good decisions, think through everything, and chair fly it, especially if there's been an event, can be very helpful. So startle factor was pretty good, distraction factor was pretty good, and everyone, dividing up duties in an emergency was very good. The pilot flying was responsible for getting us on the ground. I was responsible for talking to air traffic control, letting them know what we were doing, and making sure we were running the checklist. And any questions on this one?
Yeah, I've got a question, but also, when did the smoke occur? Or did you hear anything? Was it when you were switching tanks or when you put the boost pump on?
Put the boost pump on, switch tanks.
And
That's
then the
when it
smoke.
occurred. So that's why we thought it was in the center console.
Yeah, yeah.
So there may have just been a coincidence. We were mid-flight. We were 1 hour into a 2-hour flight.
Mm-hmm.
So it may have just been a coincidence with the passenger doing something with, she had her knapsack and all of her belongings in the back
Okay,
seat
yeah,
there.
that's a possibility.
So don't know, but if you look at the serious literature or on the different forums, had never seen anything quite described like this.
Yeah.
And it's not a logical area to have that kind of event. One of the other comments was that, and this was an interesting comment, was that it could be a USB cable. That some owners have had problems with cabling the powered cables.
Yes, yeah.
And you may have been having something go on with that. And at the same time, we'd also been having a problem with the mic jack of one of the
Yes.
headsets, which aren't powered per se that
No,
much.
no.
So again, we did due diligence. We tried to make the
Yeah.
failure happen before we took off, and they couldn't find anything because by coincidence it was scheduled for its 100-hour service the next day.
Gotcha.
So they did a deep dive.
Got a
The
couple.
cabling is important to check. I mean, I've had
Yes.
defective USB cables.
Yeah. I was just thinking the switch might have some annunciator switches, the switching from one tank to the other, where there may be some wiring that got jostled.
Yeah.
Yeah, being avionics background, that piqued my interest there, Mark.
No, it's an interesting one.
Yes.
Definitely woke us up. So
we got some questions. We got some questions.
Fire away.
Bruce, side thought, the Facebook Student Pilots Over 50 group might be a good place to introduce ACA, possible source of more mature and self-motivated pilots looking for charity reasons to fly than youngsters aiming for a 121 career.
Yes.
Good comment.
Yes.
Sean, no smoking is part of your pre-flight brief. No smoking placard.
Yes.
Yes. Okay.
It's also part of the vetting process for the volunteer pilot organizations.
Yes.
To
ask that question?
To remind people of sterile cockpit. Most of the organizations have a vetting process where they go over do's and don'ts for the passengers before they even get a flight. And no smoking is one of those.
Okay. Martin has a question. Why fly low after possible fuel problem? Considerations would be more altitude allows greater glide if engine problem from fuel. Low to get to the ground anywhere if a fire.
Yeah, so we're
considerations, yeah.
we live in an area where there's a lot of airports. And if you fly up and down the East Coast and Maine and Massachusetts, it's almost line of sight from one airport to the next airport. So we weren't so concerned about having gliding distance
Mhm.
as it were time to get on the ground in the event of something
Right, right.
not fun happening. So,
Recurred, yes, definitely.
yeah.
And that should round him out. Thank you. Rounds out the, wait, I've got one more that popped up. Sean, thank you for asking my question on smoking. All
Okay,
right.
okay.
Thanks,
Sounds
Sean.
good.
All righty. We're
Next
ready to move
one.
on. Yes.
So not something we train on a lot, but this is one that is worth going over. Um, so two adults, infant, second flight going home, 400 miles, IMC departure, VMC en route, and very, very busy airspace as usual. Um, just after getting in cruise, uh, have an AHRS failure, a CAS message, and then have a string of other crew advisory system messages. These are not the exact messages. I was looking for the picture. I couldn't find it. So this is just an example. If you do have a crew advisory system, you can have a slew of things come up on the screen at once, which makes it kind of hard to figure out where you start. Uh, and in this case, had the air data computer fail, XM weather failed, moving map failed, MFD started to fail, and had an avionics bus warning. So, as you might expect, your avionics system is going to start being upset and it's going to start yelling at you. So in this case, it started giving a continual oral tone that you could not turn off using the buttons that you would normally use to turn off the warnings. And there was a lady coming up nicely telling you that different systems had failed, which again, you could not turn off. So with all the noise going on, it was hard to hear ATC and talk to ATC. So I did ask for a divert to a VMC airport and an expedited descent. And air traffic control decided to declare an emergency for me. The plane was still flying, it's just that it was very noisy and things weren't working very well. So I did get down quickly. They gave me an ILS. I said, no, it's close. The weather is good enough for me to probably do a visual. I don't want to rely on my instruments any more than I have to. Let me get on the ground and then worry about, precision flying. So, and again, it was a rather interesting scenario because you train for partial panel, but you don't necessarily train for a slew of failures at the same time, particularly in a way that doesn't allow you to clear them. The quick reference manual didn't really have anything on this type of group failure. So instead of waiting, I could have done better and I should have just declared an emergency because there were so many things going on at once. But you do get into that startle distraction factor. So you're focused on flying the airplane as you probably should and not thinking about, what's the best way to engage air traffic control. So aviate, navigate, communicate. So definitely was aviating and thinking about getting on the ground and not so much about what my interaction with air traffic control was going to be. Also probably could have done better. In this case, the passengers in this kind of airplane don't wear headsets. So they just knew that we were going down rapidly. And very soon after we'd taken off, so they were not having a good time guessing what was going on in the back. So probably should have let them know what was going on. And that, I did sort of have to have this conversation after the fact saying, why couldn't you tell us? So something to learn, share the experience, be as calm as you can, but you're still in aviate and navigate mode, not necessarily in communicate mode. So how you balance that,
Right.
you don't really train for this kind of scenario, so it's not muscle memory at all. So it's okay not to make a good decision in terms of sharing because your focus is, flying the airplane. But
Right.
it it is a good thing. And after this, I kept, whenever I would have a different mentor or different training session, we get into the habit of saying, tell me what's the worst you've seen. I want to know things that aren't documented as scenarios. I don't want to know about good habits. I want to know about bad habits. And, every time I would meet someone that would be doing an annual review with me or just flying with me that had a lot of time in the sky, I would get a new story about something that I never heard of. So there's sources of, even if someone's a low-time pilot, you can learn from them because just about everybody has a story. And so this was an example. Again, this didn't rattle me too much. It was just one of those things that I knew the plane wasn't falling out of the sky. It was just noisy. And, I needed to get on the ground and not rely on my avionics that much to do so as I was getting on the ground. And then something that I considered is I got on the ground and of course, virtually all of the messages went away.
Of course.
Of course.
Yes.
So I decided not to fly the passenger. I put them in a rental car and got them to a train and they made it to their destination. But the lesson here was that, oh, it's not failed anymore. I just powered on and off and everything's going to work. I'm going to get back in the plane and I'm going to fly in IMC back to my home base. So and this was a while ago before I was as cynical now as I am. So now I'm like super duper conservative. So I got in the plane, started the engines, no messages, no failures. Avionics all seem to be working fine. And I'm taxiing down near the end of the taxiway, and my right PFD starts flickering on and off like it was losing power coming on and off. And I said, maybe not a good idea to go fly.
Yeah. That's Spidey sense. It just too many things happening.
So after that, if I had, once ever type experiences with the avionics, I just didn't press it anymore. And the plane wasn't down that long; it was down a week, and it just required, a couple of simple changes. So, so I did well, and I did leave the plane in the end, but I was tempted to try to, stretch it. So again, the moral here, the thing I took away is, I want to train for as many things that are not normal as possible. And again, learn what the boundaries of my abilities are to deal with startling events or distracting events. So if we don't have any questions, I'll move on to another fun one. I'm not sure if any of you have had this happen before. So a lot of busy airport areas have other airports under the Bravo shelves, and controllers can get very busy, especially with different types of airplanes and different airplanes or certain types of airplanes commonly going into certain airports. So the first one is flying from the north to the Bravo. Air traffic control normally has you fly then around the Bravo to get to the airport you're trying to go to south of the Bravo. And instead of following the normal descent rate, they descended me early and were giving me headings. And I finally realized that the headings were close to a final approach fix for an approach into the wrong airport. So it was aiming me towards the center of the Bravo. So no matter what, I knew that if they correctly gave me or tried to recover, they were going to be recovering an airspace and the inner core of the Bravo airspace. So that was not going to work. So, so happened to mention to them proactively that, I'm going to this airport on the south, and it was all, pause, and saying, oops, sorry, and vectors considerably out of the way and coming around to the other side. So it's one of those situations where I probably could have done better and said, wow, this is an anomaly earlier, saying, what are they thinking? Instead of just letting it progress as much as I let it progress. And air traffic control is human like everybody else. And if they get busy, it is possible for them to forget where you're going. Another common route into this Bravo area airport is coming up from the south over the ocean. They keep you high in this normal descent approach. But pretty far out, it was a busy traffic day, pretty far out, they descended me all the way down to 3,000 feet from the mid 30s. And I was like, not figuring out what the heck was going on. And if you guys fly turbines at all, as soon as you start getting low, your fuel consumption can go up by more than double. So that starts messing around with your range, and it's not a fun thing. So they got me down toward descending towards 3,000 and gave me a heading. Then they finally gave me this last little tidbit, which was expect the visual into this airport. That was, very far away. So it's on Long Island, and I was going to Boston. So, 2 states away, way out. So I had to say, no, I'm not going there. I don't know what and I ended up not having to declare low fuel, but I was very, very close to having a low fuel event because of that. And again, it was me just having absolute blind faith in air traffic control, giving me, directions and not necessarily thinking ahead to saying, well, maybe this is a mistake. And I've got to say, wrong airport has probably only happened 4 or 5 times in 15 years. So it's not like it's a frequent thing. But unfortunately, it seems to happen in very busy airspace and can really make your day not go well. Any questions on this one?
Brian asked, what is the name of the group that flies patients to their doctors? And there's a myriad of them, right?
Yeah,
Across the country.
there's a lot of organizations. And if you go to the Air Care Alliance website, you can look under directory or group of organizations, and you can look at all the ones that are registered with us. But there's a number of them have the name Angel Flight in them, but they're all discrete organizations and they all cover different geographies. Then there are ones that don't have Angel Flight in the name, like Lifeline or Skyhope, and they do similar things, flying, people on medical missions. And then there's other specialty organizations that focus on kids or focus on using airplanes that require 2 pilots, like Corporate Angel Network. So again, many, many different types of organizations out there, but you can find them either through the Air Care Alliance website or just email me with where you live and what you're interested in doing, and I'll be happy to point you in the right direction.
One last question. Sean asks, what is deny ULS? I don't remember.
Deny ULS.
I'm not sure.
What, was it on this slide or?
I don't remember seeing it myself personally. Deny ILS?
Oh, here, this one here. Assign ILS and decline.
Yeah, maybe that's what it is. Well, they just didn't.
So they declared an emergency. As I was descending, they were assigning me an ILS approach,
Yeah.
and the weather was good enough that I said no. And if you're having multiple avionics failures, you don't want to be doing approaches with avionics you're not confident in.
Yeah.
And air traffic control isn't seeing what you're seeing, so you need to help. They're just doing what they think is most expediting a safe outcome, and you just need not to be shy about declaring what you want to do based on your assessment of the situation. So that's all I was doing here. Oh, here it is. I got it over here. This should have been deny ILS, not ULS.
Right. Okay.
Okay. This is another unique one. It's from the winter, so if you want to think back to cooler weather, this is an interesting one.
Hey, Mark, it is 8:04.
I was just noticed what time it was. Yeah, so sorry about that. We went over.
Right. We're good.
We will jump to the end. If you guys have any questions, please let us know. This is how you can get in touch with us. We do appreciate you attending these. It's a lot of fun to put the content together and share experiences. And if you do have anything that you'd like to share from a scenario or experience point of view, please email me here. I'm glad to help. It's been a privilege to be able to have you guys attend these and learn from the emails that you get after the fact. It's been great. So we will see you in a month, And again, if you have any last questions, Rob, let me know and we'll answer them now or just email me.
It looks like we're doing good.
Great. Well, another hour done. Thanks again so much for being interested
Yes.
in the topic, and we'll look forward to seeing some of you or all of you in the next session.
Yes. Thank you, everybody.
Yeah. Bye-bye.